All right, today we're going to unpack a really fascinating and maybe a little challenging idea from our source material. It's a concept called the serpent mind.
So the source material kicks off with this massive question, one that's been around forever. Who is the serpent that has deceived the whole world? And, when we hear that, most of us immediately picture a snake, right? A literal reptile. But what if the real deceiver isn't a creature at all? What if it's something way closer? Something, say, inside our own heads?
And that's really the core idea we're digging into here. The serpent isn't some creature with flesh and scales. It's a mind, a specific way of thinking. You could even call it a kind of frequency that, according to the source, was introduced to humanity right at the very, very beginning.
Okay, so for the next few minutes, let's try to reframe how we think about this ancient story. We're going to stop picturing a physical snake and start thinking about this idea of a serpent of the mind.
Think about the word choice here, crafty. The source points to this passage from Genesis and highlights that word, because the serpent's power, it wasn't about brute force, right? It didn't have fangs or claws in this fight. It used information, persuasion, ideas. This was basically, when you think about it, the world's very first information war, and it was waged directly on the human mind.
So, how does this information warfare actually work? Well, the source material gives us this really powerful metaphor to help us get our heads around it. It asks us to think of the human mind as a kind of radio.
And this is where we get the definition of the serpent mind. See, it's not just some random thought that pops in your head. It's a specific frequency. It's a broadcast, a station, if you will, that's constantly transmitting a certain kind of wisdom, a wisdom that's described as earthly, natural, and demonic. And the thing is, any of us can tune into it.
So here's how the whole analogy breaks down. Think of your spine as the antenna, reaching from the earth all the way up to the heavens. Your mind? That's the receiver, and it's always picking up signals. But, and this is the most important part, you're the one holding the dial. You are the one who gets to choose the station. And this leads us to the two big competing broadcasts, which the source pulls from the book of James. You've got two main stations you can tune into. On one frequency, you've got the wisdom from above. It's described as clean, peaceable, gentle. But then, on the other channel, you've got the earthly wisdom of the serpent. Earthly, natural, demonic. Totally different sources, and they lead to totally different places. Okay, so keeping this whole radio analogy in mind, let's rewind. Let's go all the way back to that pivotal moment in the garden. Our source frames this as the very first time humanity decided, you know what? I'm going to change the station.
So just try to picture the scene, right? Adam's mind is tuned to one station. He's getting a crystal clear signal from his creator. But then, a new broadcast cuts through the static. Eve hears it. She picks up this new station, and man, is it broadcasting a very different message.
And what was this new station promising? Oh, just the ultimate temptation. You will be like Elohim, like gods or divine beings. You'll know good and evil for yourselves. It was basically a promise of enlightenment without having to be obedient. And what an incredibly seductive signal that was. And in that moment, when they chose to tune into that new station, humanity's default frequency was fundamentally rewired. The mind, which was designed to receive this clear signal of life, was now permanently tuned to the complex, conflicting, just the static of good mixed with evil. The serpent mind wasn't just a temptation anymore. It became part of our operating system, a part of the human condition. So if we're all kind of tuned to this poisonous frequency, what are the results? What does that look like? And maybe more importantly, is there a cure? Well, the source material offers a fascinating and honestly a pretty unexpected remedy. So what does it actually look like to be locked on to the serpent station? According to the source, it means your mighty one is your own stomach, your own appetite. Your entire focus gets pulled down to earthly things, power, consumption, desire. You're basically exchanging the truth of a creator for the lie that's being broadcast by the serpent. But this is where the story takes this really fascinating, kind of paradoxical turn. The source points us to that moment when Moshe, or Moses, lifted up a bronze serpent in the wilderness. Remember that? The people were literally being poisoned by real snakes, and the cure was to look up at the very image of their affliction. The symbol of the poison itself became the path to healing. How wild is that? And this whole event is presented as a foreshadowing.
The idea is that the Messiah, by being lifted up, took on the curse of the serpent nature itself. He became the bronze serpent for us, the remedy for the poison that had infected the mind of man. He turned the very agent of the fall into the instrument of our redemption.
So all of this, it brings the entire concept right out of ancient history and smack into this very moment. This stops being just a story about the past. It becomes about the frequency that you are choosing, right here, right now.
And really, the choice boils down to this. You've got the serpent mind, that earthly frequency, which is always pulling you downward, towards the dust. And then you have the spirit of Elohim, which is always calling you upward, towards life. It's a fundamental choice between these two opposing forces.
And make no mistake, this isn't just some historical thing or a neat metaphor. The source is very clear that this ancient serpent, this original deceiver, it's still active. That signal is still being broadcast. That frequency is still on the air today.
Which leaves us with one final and pretty heavy question to think about. If your mind is the receiver and eternity is the broadcast, what station have you chosen?